Continuing now, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Jimmy Sengenberger coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner at the leadership program of the Rockies retreat at the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Saving Freedom 1776. And it is so apropos then, if we're trying to save freedom 1776 at this conference, that we would have on this program Dr. Carol Swain. She is an award-winning political scientist, a former professor of political science and professor of law at Vanderbilt University, and a lifetime member of the James Madison Society. As chairwoman of the 1776 Commission, Dr. Swain's work reflected and honored America's founding and was intended to serve as an education tool in contrast to the New York Times 1619 Project. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to get nearly as far as it should have. She's the author of 9 books. Dr. Carol Swain, welcome to Jimmy at the Crossroads. It's great to have you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I got
Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
What you're doing and what you were trying to do with the 1776 Commission, because we had Dr. Peter Wood on this program to delve into the 1619 Project a few months back, because it really is one of those instances in education of kids not getting the kind of introduction to American government and our founding that they should be. So talk to us about your passion for the year 1776, for the founding of this country and the basic principles of this country.
Well, I can tell you that before I was appointed to the 1776 Commission, I was involved with Bob Woodson's 1776 Unites, and we, that organization came into being in reaction to the 1619 Project, and what we wanted to do was provide an alternative and a truer perspective of America as a nation. And so that organization, 1776 Unites, was probably several months before the 1776 Commission.
That's right.
But the commission itself came out of an executive order by President Trump. He did the executive order in October 2020, and the commission met and was announced. The members were announced on December 18th, 2020. So by then, you know, the election had happened, and it was all this controversy, and it was clear by then they were calling Biden, you know, president-elect. So we met twice before we were dissolved by executive order, and we were able to put together a report that gave, you know, just pretty much what we had hoped to do, how we saw the Declaration of Independence, and what we focused on, that was, you know, the birth date of our nation. But even though the drafters of that document, they were imperfect men and women, as we all are, they put together and crafted a document that provided the basis, you know, for the elimination of slavery. It took us through the world wars, the civil rights movement, and everything that has happened subsequently that helped define our nation. And if you think about the blacks that came out of slavery and Black America, they have always, you know, believed in the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And so when Dr. Martin Luther King talked about America living up to its ideals and judging people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, it was in line with who we are as an American people. And so what we wanted to do with that 1776 Unites as well as the 1776 Commission was to provide an alternative to the anti-Americanism of the 1619 Project.
Yeah, well, you talk about early black Americans, like Frederick Douglass, for example.
And Booker T. Washington is my favorite because he's a Virginian like me. He was a Virginian.
Absolutely. And so Frederick Douglass, though, and I've talked about him quite a bit, especially his speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, where he talks about the saving principles of the Declaration of Independence. And that was a time when slavery, it was I think, 1854. Slavery was around. He was lucky to be, a freed man by that point, but just barely from slavery into freedom, and had the opportunity to then go live his life. And he was saying, look, the United States is falling short of its principles. They are still saving principles. They're not false as the 1619 projects would suggest. And he talked about the glorious liberty document in all caps of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
How do we get from that to where we are today?
Well, I can tell you that that people with political agendas have decided to politicize America's past for power. And so it involves demonizing the country with rhetoric and a narrative that will destroy us unless we do successfully push back against it. And if you look at the situation of the newly freed slaves and their relationship with white America, you have to keep in mind that there were always abolitionists. There were always white people fighting for the elimination of slavery. And after emancipation occurred, it was white people, you think about the Rosenwald family, that set up schools across the South to educate the newly freed slaves. The colleges and universities, the black colleges and universities, they were set up by white people's philanthropy, trying to make amends for slavery. And Booker T. Washington, his autobiography, Up From Slavery, it tells his story, his struggle to get education and his success, but also how he was able to fund Tuskegee Institute. And I understand now that there's a revisionism going on that says that Up From Slavery is a work of fiction. And so is the Tuskegee Institute, that we could drive to Alabama and, actually physically visit, the university now. What do you do with that if Up From Slavery all of a sudden is a work of fiction? Is the Institute itself a work of fiction? Does it exist?
It is unfathomable how we get to this point, Dr. Carol Swain, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. As we have a few minutes left with you, as I was telling you before we started our conversation, I ran for several years a nonprofit called the Liberty Day Institute, and we were in public schools. We were educating fifth graders in particular on the U.S. Constitution, American government, providing Constitution booklets and teaching resources from thanks to generous foundation grants and so forth. We reached hundreds of thousands of fifth graders. I spoke to many dozens of fifth grade classes, and the number one thing that I kept hearing from educators was that they lacked resources. And it's so disheartening that when resources are now starting to come to the fore, it's something like the 1619 project that they're bringing in more into the classrooms. How do we combat, and how can parents combat effectively against the 1619 project and its revisionist history approach to America?
Well, I can tell you that the 1776 commission that was dissolved by President Biden, we reconvened in late May. And one of the things that we decided is that we're going to have a website, with resources on it. But we also are going to encourage people in every state to set up their own 1776 commissions and to engage in grassroots activism. And so we applauded the fact that there were legislators in a number of states that had put forth bills designed to counter critical race theory. And they were using, a sophisticated, many of them, model that didn't name it critical race theory. It just described the actions that they were engaged in, that are anti-American, anti-civil rights, anti-equal protection clause. So we were encouraging that to take place. And part of what the 1776 Commission report, as well as a book that was published with a new introduction by me, Larry Arnn, and Matthew Spalding, one of the things that we encouraged people to do is, for teaching civic education, is to go back to those original documents people need to read the original documents, and we very much emphasize the need for strong families because we know that the family is like the backbone of civilization. Part of what the political left, the critical theory, what they're trying to do is destroy families. But families are important, as well as our Judeo-Christian values and principles. All of those things are things that we view as very important. The 1776 Commission report, again, it's a book that you can order now. It has a new introduction, and I think that would give people some ideas. But we believe that money for resources is out there. There are some political action groups that are organizing. There are people that are writing curriculums. Hillsdale College has a curriculum for K through 12, as well as the Woodson Center has a curriculum. So we're out there putting out resources that people can present as an alternative to 1619, which is a work of fiction.
And final question for you, Dr. Swain, and so appreciate your time here at the LPR retreat today. Are you optimistic or pessimistic at this point, given how far gone we have become, especially with the 1619 project, with the Biden administration having a grant program that they want to put into place to advance 1619 in schools? Are you optimistic or pessimistic, especially based on the groundswell of grassroots support for our nation's founding documents and principles that the 1776 Commission and others have gotten?
Well, first of all, I believe that critical race theory and fighting it is the civil rights issue of our times. I'm optimistic because people are rising up and fighting back, and they're fighting. They own strong ground when it comes to principle. When you look at the civil rights legislation that's been passed nationally as well as in many states, when you read the Constitution, they are on solid ground. And one thing about America is that we all know that we don't shame people or bully them because of the color of their skin. And if it's unacceptable to be done to racial and ethnic minorities, it's unacceptable to be done to white people. And so I am optimistic. I do believe it's a time that racial and ethnic minorities like me need to lock arms with our white brothers and sisters and lead the movement, because some people have lost their voice. But fortunately, white people are finding their voice on this issue. And the way to be effective is to always center it around principles.
Exactly.
Principles. Stay principle-based. And I think we can win this. It's ludicrous what they're doing.
It's an American issue and an American battle, regardless of race,
Yes.
ethnicity, religion, what have you. That is the crux of the matter, to be sure.
Yes, and I think that we will prevail. I believe the political left has overplayed its hand, but I didn't expect that something just so un-American could have gotten as far as it has, and how it has impacted every institution of our society, including our military and intelligence agencies. And even now, even within the medical field, there are Harvard-educated doctors saying that they need to give preferential treatment to minority emergency room patients over whites. This is crazy. This is insane. And I think that we need to right the wrongs as far as just going back to sound judgment, values, and principles. There's one race, the human race, and we stand or fall together.
On those saving principles about which Frederick Douglass was such a strong advocate. Dr. Carol Swain, thanks so much for taking the time here at the Leadership Program of the Rockies Retreat. Appreciate your advocacy at this important time and your time today.
Thank you.
Talking politics, great for generations. Oh, what a mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Yeah.